Leslie is one of ours. She is a British Columbian, and we are honored to have her here today. She was diagnosed herself with Parkinson's disease in 2011, and shortly thereafter, her husband was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia. Big changes, and in an effort to make sense of them, Leslie began to write. Her essay, Adaptation, won the CBC Creative Nonfiction Prize for 2016, and it was announced at World Congress in Portland, Oregon, just last September. So it was really thrilling to be there and find out about that. But she's here with us today and will help to inspire hope in all of us. Please join me in welcoming Leslie.
Good morning. My goodness. Well, it's lovely to be here. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Miriam, for all the lovely arranging, and Parkinson's BC for inviting me to be part of your conference this morning. It is humbling to be considered a motivational speaker. I'm not an expert in anything, Parkinson's related or otherwise. But the one thing I have come to believe in the last few years is that the stories we tell each other build connections in our external worlds, and how we tell them directly affects how we think and feel in our internal ones. The Ojibwa writer Richard Wagamese died recently. He was a brilliant, kind, eloquent teller of stories, both real and imagined. He said that by telling our stories, we not only forge relationships built on understanding and respect, but we grow into self-realization, and that is certainly my experience. So today, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell stories. And I hope that something in the telling resonates with each of you. And I really do wish that there were time to listen to all of your stories. This is my second Parkinson's BC conference. My first was in the fall of 2011. I attended a conference for the newly diagnosed. At that time, my husband was beginning to exhibit symptoms of dementia, and I was routinely throwing up my levodopa and struggling to keep my left leg moving. I was bewildered, frightened, sleep-deprived, and many months away from my first appointment at the UBC clinic. I felt like I was having to drive a very big bus all by myself on the wrong side of the road without a map and with no training. I'm sure many of you can relate to that experience. One of the speakers at that conference was the medication specialist nurse from UBC. She spoke with knowledge and humor and compassion, and so at lunch I went up to talk to her, started to tell her my story, and burst into tears. She listened quietly, assured me that there was treatment for the nausea, drew me diagrams of how the medication was operating in my brain, told me to go home, tell my GP to please phone UBC and get some advice on my treatment. It changed my world, that 10-minute conversation, that opportunity to tell my story. The second world-changing connection came into my life, also courtesy of Parkinson's BC. My friend Jill Carson, who some of you may know and who is here today, posted a piece on the Parkinson's BC Facebook page. Jill calls it her rant. It was a powerful, frustrated call to action on the part of those of us living with Parkinson's disease. It was like nothing I had ever read before. It inspired me and intrigued me, and so I messaged her. And that started a relationship built on our shared stories that picked me up, held me close, then spun me out into a web of connections that now reaches all over the world. Connections that have challenged me to think deeply and honestly about what it means to be a caregiver and to be a patient. This past fall, I attended the World Parkinson's Congress in Portland. Even though I traveled to Portland with a very dear friend who put her life on hold to accompany me, it was a very complicated time. I was on the edge of turning 65, with all that means. I was living in a new town and living a life I had not anticipated. My first picture book for children had just been released that same week. and I was going to be away from my husband for the longest period of time since he had gone into care 2 years earlier. And early that morning, CBC made their announcement about the nonfiction prize. So I missed the opening sessions of Congress. And by the time I made it to the center that afternoon, I was feeling very parky. I was exhausted, I was shaky, I was off balance, and feeling emotionally flat, and beating myself up for not feeling the joy that I ought to be experiencing when everybody I knew and loved was so happy on my behalf. I walked into the main exhibition hall, and the first thing I noticed were the displays by the big pharmaceutical companies. And I know, oh golly, I know that the pills I take and the patch that I wear make it possible for me to walk and to talk and to hold my grandbabies and to feed my husband and to ride my bike and even to be here today. And I am so grateful. But I confess that as I looked at all those shiny displays and all those shiny salespeople and all those goodie bags, my head exploded a little bit. Oh my goodness, I thought, we are indeed very big business. So on that cheerful note, I turned and walked out of the building, sat in the plaza to settle myself down and to try and tell myself a little bit different story. Then a tiny little woman stopped nearby. She stood there, she didn't move. I imagined that she was off, frozen, and struggling to get her brain to tell her leg to get going again. So I walked over and asked her if she needed help. I've lost she was struggling for a word, my sticks. Oh, your sticks, I said. Your crutches. Yes, she nodded. How can I help? Do you speak Spanish? She said. So we stood there, and in a few moments she managed to get one leg to move and then the other, and we shuffled together back into the building. I found her a place to sit, and I went off in search of the cavalry. Pretty soon I was bringing to her a young volunteer who spoke English and Spanish, and very soon after that, that volunteer told me that they had made arrangements for delivery of new crutches, that they were tracking down her friends, and that they would stay with her until everything was sorted out. I hugged them both goodbye. I blubbered a little bit because that is what I do best. And I headed back outside to the plaza to collect myself one more time. And there I found that something had shifted inside of me because of my brief connection to that very brave little person. She was the unwitting agent of a profound change. Despite all of her challenges, and without the very tools that propped her up, she still tried to meet her goals for the day, to trust in kindness, and to give others that profound gift of being allowed to help. With all the goodness that had just come my way, I had let myself be overwhelmed by what seemed too much. Instead of focusing on the next step and being grateful for the help and support I had and I have in abundance in my life. Truth is, Parkinson's disease is going to cause me discomfort in public places, but I am going to have to keep going out. And if I lose my crutches, real or symbolic, I am going to trust to that dear tiny person's truth, that there is kindness in the world, and to the connections I have made and I am bound to make if I am open to them. I struggle very, very much with accepting that my husband has advanced Lewy body dementia and that he is in care. Sorrow is a constant in my story, as it is in so many other stories. And I worry, what if this sorrow is the intimation of a darkness with which I will have to contend one day? I know the statistics on Parkinson's and depression. Sometimes I feel cornered just by the thought of those black dogs. A year ago, I went to visit Lincoln, as I do every day. One of the care aides pulled me aside as I entered his cottage. "Oh, Leslie," she said, "I have to tell you a story." She told me that Lincoln had woken late, and when she had last checked, he was still in bed. She sat at a small workstation near his room, working on reports and listening for him. Her partner went into Lincoln's room, came out immediately and asked where he was. "Well, he's in bed," she said. "No, he's not," her coworker replied. So they both flew into his room, and then they heard him. He was behind the door, fully aware that they were looking for him, and he was laughing. I've never heard him laugh like that, she said, laughing herself as she told me. We had to hold him up. He was laughing so hard. The three of us were laughing so hard. It was so great. It was amazing. I almost peed my pants. And I know that this is what happened that morning. Lincoln crawled out of bed. He found himself in the corner behind the door. He often found himself, and I often found him standing in corners. And to his delight, his caregiver showed up, and he got to give them that little moment of anxiety. This was a wonderful, perfect Lincoln-esque moment, and a reminder to me that something essentially himself, joyful, spirited, and fun-loving, still lived inside of him. Lewy body dementia and Parkinson's disease have very much in common, and our stories may resolve in remarkably similar ways, Lincoln's and mine. But at that time, his story took him into real corners and mine into metaphorical ones, and the difference was that he knew to laugh from his. I remember that day. I remember that he was and is connected to his caretakers in ways that continue to ease my sorrow. His laughter lit up my dark places. It is grace. No matter how you define it or what you believe, his laughter then, his smile now, that is grace. And I only came to understand that through the telling of this story. This past week, the Parkinson's community lost Tom Isaacs, an iconic, indomitable, heroic, creative, inspiring role model for those of us who knew of him and the fortunate who knew him. He was the unattainable ideal of hopefulness. He has been much on my mind these last few days. And though I am not capable of his brand of unwavering faith in an imminent cure, I am able to hear his voice in my head and to allow his story to lead me to a place of joy and optimism. Because why not? Why not tap into the Tom inside of us? Whatever the future holds, why not, for this day and for the next, walk Tom's way? And I'd like to end by sharing one more short piece I wrote 3 years ago because Jill Carson said I needed to make a video. And I do what Jilly tells me to do. It's what I knew then. It's what I know now. I think my friend Blake is here. Blake Williams? Are you here, buddy? Okay, he's not, so I'm going to do this on my own. I have one more short story. It is 3 minutes long. Its title is Parkenstick in 3 minutes. Goes like this. And I'm going to try to not look at my notes. One day I'm me. The next, I stumble through the looking glass, fall flat on my face in a place where all my thoughts are fears, and die an aging Alice, drowning her tears. And the road to diagnosis, you know it's plagued with neuroses. Can't sleep, balance wonky, hand shaking, leg dragging. My arm swings if I make it, please God help me fake it. And the internet creeping, late night after night when I need to be sleeping. But there I am, the Google queen. Tap, 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 reading the screen, trying not to weep. This sounds just like me. Is that what my future is going to be? All this, nothing compared to the day when a doctor of neurology without apology, and why should he didn't give it to me, he tells me there is nothing else that it could be. You've got Parkinson's disease, and because I say that's no surprise, he wonders at the tears in my eyes. In the days and weeks that follow, I wallow in sorrow. I rage against my fate and my failure to compensate for what nature or genes have done to my neurotransmission facility. Oh, it takes time to go from hating to accommodating a new reality. But I do. I start to count blessings, and goodness knows that list just grows and grows, and the more I count, the more they mount up, all those good things. And then I realize that my eyes have been dry for what, a whole day or two, and that sniveling inner troll I used to fight with all my might has grown smaller overnight into a half-pint scrawny runt that I can shake my finger at, shake my whole hand at, might as well, darn thing's going to shake anyhow. And he cowers at the power of my recovery, this discovery that I am grown so large that I am back in charge, and that's where I live most of the time. But that dime, the one upon which life turns, sometimes it spins so fast I go flying off into inner space. Not a good place where the fair woman lives in all her rags, and that old hag tries to drag me back into despondency, relentlessly urging my Pollyanna self to give it up. Don't want to sip from that cup. It's toxic brew. Designer blended just for you, she croons, but it's my very own nightmare thinking that I'm drinking. Gotta spit it out. Dance it, walk it, sing and cry it, talk and shout it, write and write it, meditate and medicate it gone. And then there's laughter. There is nothing more effective, joy protective, jubilation, celebration of the spirit than a belly full of hilarity. It is the stake driven straight into the shaking, quaking heart of neurodegenerating absurdity. You might say, and I would agree, that I have become a trite cliche of carpe diem, glass half fullness. But this much for sure is true, it is not virtue, but luck or DNA that holds at bay those jack-booted soldiers of depression when others, wiser, kinder, stronger, must suffer their oppression. And I recognize this gift, this saving grace. It is the blessing that permits my determined inner voice. Embrace this day, she cries. There is no other choice. Embrace this day. Embrace the journey. Embrace your story. Embrace each other. Forward together. Thank you very much.